One of the worst people in life is the guy who always reminds you that it could have been worse. Yes, there are some times where that is applicable, but there are other times where you just have to know how to read the room and understand the situation and not do that. As an example, if you find out that your mom died in a car accident, the absolute worst response to say is, it could have been worse. You could have lost both your mom and your dad in the accident. If a doctor comes to you and says you have stage 3 cancer, the last thing you want your doctor to say is, it could have been worse. It could be stage 4. You get the idea. Obviously, those are pretty serious situations, but there's a difference between being optimistic and having a positive outlook on things and bouncing back, and doing that when no one is in the mood for it. Saying it could have been worse when things are already really freaking bad and people don't want to hear it is not a smart move and makes you look like a moron. Which brings me to the man you've been watching this whole time, because this man right here is Tampa Bay Buccaneers safety Mark Robinson. After playing sporadically with the Kansas City Chiefs from 1984 to 87, never really cracking the starting lineup, he got traded to the Buccaneers in 1988, hoping to solidify a secondary that was near the bottom of the NFL in passing defense throughout the mid-1980s. And in terms of making a good first impression, let's just say that Robinson did not do that. Not just with his on-the-field play, but with some of his comments afterwards that left everyone scratching their heads, and seemed to go directly against what his own head coach said. Because this is the story behind what might just be, considering the circumstances, the dumbest defensive back in Buccaneers history. And when it makes absolutely no sense to be the guy that says, it could have been worse. Make sure you hit that like button down below, subscribe, hype up that video, and turn on that notification bell so you don't miss a single video that we post on the channel. Because we post every single day on here about the weird and the wacky history of the NFL with stories like this one that you've never heard of before. So if you like that sort of stuff, then this is definitely the place for you. Thanks in advance for liking and subscribing, and for hyping up the video, and for helping us grow this community. And with that in mind, let's talk about the time that things could not have gone worse for the man who said that things could absolutely be worse. Before I talk about the actual incident in question, and just how tone-deaf it was, we need some context to understand the game that sparked this in the first place, and how this game was going. It's September 4th, 1988. It's week 1 of a brand new NFL season, and we find ourselves down at Tampa Stadium for this NFC matchup between the Philadelphia Eagles and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Obviously, you want to start the season off on the right foot, as over the past 3 seasons, from 1985 to 1987, of the 15 teams in the NFC to make the playoffs in that stretch, 12 of them won their first game of the year, with only 1 team per season in the NFC making the playoffs after losing their first game. It's important to make a good first impression and start the season off strong. And as you're about to find out, the Buccaneers did not do that. In fact, they did the exact opposite of that. Because this game was so bad that, I kid you not, the Eagles were playing their backups to start the third quarter. The final score of the game was 41-14 in favor of Philly, but I promise you, it was even worse than that, because the entire second half was just Philly playing everyone else and treating it like a preseason game. The Eagles led it 34-0 at the halftime break, leading it by 5 scores after 30 minutes. The Eagles had 7 drives in the first half and were able to score on 6 of them. Tampa not only turned it over 5 times, but all 5 of those turnovers came off of interceptions thrown by Vinny Testaverde, as he had one of the ugliest games of his pro football career. In fact, the Eagles' defense was that good, and Testaverde was that careless with the football, that the Eagles had 3 drives in the first half that started in a goal-to-go spot. Testaverde turned it over that often and helped the Eagles out that much that on 3 separate occasions in the first 30 minutes, Randall Cunningham took the field for the first play of the drive, and it was a goal-to-go situation. Philly had 213 yards of offense in the first half compared to 94 yards of offense for Tampa. And even though the final stats may look even, it has to do with Philly resting everyone in the second half and Philly getting a bunch of their drives off of insanely good starting field position. This game that you're watching was so dominant that even Eagles head coach Buddy Ryan, who's always outspoken and always has something negative to say and has no filter whatsoever, had nothing. As Ryan said after the game, that was the best first half of football I've ever seen or been associated with. We could have beaten anybody the way we played. We could have given out 100 game balls. And seeing as the Eagles led it 21-0 and led it by 3 scores not even 13 minutes into the game, I completely get where he's coming from. However, when one team plays that well and dominates to that extent, you can expect the other team to be, well, not as happy and not as pleased with the outcome. Considering the fact that this was a 5-score game by halftime, the fact that the game was so bad that the backups for the opposition came in with 30 minutes to go, and the fact that you got booed off your home field at halftime, to say that this was not a good performance on your end if you're Tampa Bay would be putting it lightly. It seemed as if no one on the Bucs was happy. Not offensively for the turnovers and lack of a run game, not on special teams with the sloppiness there thanks to a fake punt touchdown by the Eagles and a bad snap on a punt in the first half, and not defensively for allowing the Eagles to score just about every time they had the ball early on. To give you an idea of how tense the situation was after the game, Bucs head coach Ray Perkins said afterwards, "That was pretty embarrassing. At least it was embarrassing to me. We didn't exhibit the type of play that even gives us the right to call ourselves a football team. If any of them do, they should be shot." Seriously, Perkins was saying that the team was so poor that anyone in that locker room who thought they played well and who wasn't embarrassed by that performance should be shot. Bring out a gun of your choosing, because Perkins is going to shoot you if you thought you played well and look good out there. I'm fairly confident that's against the CBA and that coaches aren't allowed to shoot their players. It could have been a different era back then, I don't know, but you get the idea. Perkins was livid, and this game was about as bad as it could get. They allowed more points than any other team in football during the first week, had the worst point differential in football during the first week, and looked incompetent and in over their heads in all 3 phases of the game. No one could take away anything positive from this performance that you've been watching. That is, except for one man. Because one man dared to speak up when no one else would. And one man dared to question what we all just saw with our own eyes. And in some cases, paid money for on a hot, muggy day inside Tampa Stadium. Because that man I referenced earlier, Mark Robinson, he had some words to say that were a complete 180 from those words of Ray Perkins. And again, this was Robinson's first game as a Buck, so this was, in many ways, his first impression with a lot of the team and a lot of the players. Safe to say, it wasn't a good one. Because as Robinson said, going completely against what Perkins said, even risking the fact that his own coach would make him think of the Rabbits, hey, it could have been a lot worse, like 100-0. Plus, we could have come out with a bunch of bad injuries. It's reality. Seriously, it could have been a lot worse. If he's 7 in the context of, we played so badly that the Eagles could have made it 100-0 if they left their starters in, that's one thing. But that's not what Robinson was going for here. Robinson was seriously going for the response similar to that of, hey, it wasn't all that bad. We scored some points and didn't allow 100, and none of our players died. He even added, I kid you not, it could have been really bad. Yeah, because 41-14 with the game being 34-0 at the halftime break isn't really bad. Almost like a pitcher getting yanked from a game before recording it out and saying that it could have been really bad and could have been a lot worse. Now, obviously, there are things that you can say that don't necessarily use that exact same phrasing, but can drive a point home and can be smart to say. You could say something like, we didn't play well today at all, but at the end of the day, it's just one game in a 16-game season, and we've got to bounce back and figure out what went wrong. but our season's not over after the first game of the season. There are plenty of teams that start off 0-1 and don't look good right away and get it figured out. And I have confidence that we can do that too. You could say something like, the Eagles whooped our butts today, and nothing went right today. But I know we can bounce back and prove by the end of the year that the way we played today was not indicative of what our actual season is going to be. Say anything along those lines, and fine. I'm not making this video, and this isn't being remembered and talked about nearly 4 decades later. I'm not saying to throw in the towel after one game in a 16-game season. But to say this? To say that it could have been worse and could have been really bad when it was already bad enough? Keep in mind, since the merger, this was only the 8th time in NFL history that a team was shut out at the end of the first half and trailed by at least 34 points. It was the first time it ever happened to the Bucs. So this was legitimately the worst first half in Buccaneers history. And it was legitimately the largest halftime deficit any team in NFL history ever faced at the time during the opening week of the season. It's kind of hard to do worse. Again, of all the games played in week 1, this was literally the worst first half ever. So for Robinson to say something like that, especially considering what his coach said in the press conference, is asinine to me. That's the kind of culture Tampa's players were fostering in the mid-'80s. Because the fact that Robinson would say something like this after this game right here that you've been watching this entire time is mind-boggling to me. Robinson didn't get shot for those comments, at least. He was able to play next week with no gun wounds in his body. But it still raised a ton of eyebrows for being absolutely tone deaf, for almost mocking the fans that came here and paid money for their tickets by trying to downplay everything, for being false in the realistic context, like how saying a 13-0 baseball game could have been worse, because it could have been 15-0, even though that's never been done before in the majors, and for just not being the smart thing to say in that spot for obvious reasons, especially considering what your coach was saying about that game. So if there's a really bad situation happening, and you're thinking of being that person who thinks they're bringing good news by saying it could have been worse, when in actuality, that's not what anyone wants to hear right now, and it's kind of hard for things to be worse, don't do it. Just don't do it. Just like you wouldn't say to your parents after getting a 40 on a test that it could have been worse because you could have gotten a 20, you wouldn't say to the fans who just paid money to watch you lay an egg that the game that they saw wasn't as bad as they thought it was, and it could have been worse than a 34-0 deficit at the halftime break. Even though this was almost unheard of, and literally was the largest halftime deficit faced by any team at the time for the opening week of the season. If your coach is threatening to shoot you for thinking you played well and look good out there, and you, in your first game, are making those kinds of comments, good freaking luck. That's all I'll say. Good freaking luck. Because on this September day in 1988, if you were watching the Bucs lay an egg and were watching them play like crap, just remember, according to one of their players, it could have been worse. Seriously. Check out our live streaming schedule for the next few days. We're live every single day on this channel, whether we're covering a sporting event or playing GeoGuessr or just taking your requests. So make sure you like and subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss a single time that we go live and so that you can join this community. Also, thanks to all our members and our Patreon supporters who get exclusive perks like their name at the end of each video, members-only Q&A streams, and cool emojis to use on videos and during streams. See how you can join this community and become a member or a Patreon member by clicking the link in the description below.